I think it was one of the most darkest times in America because you had, thus said, Americans, you know what I'm saying, actually being, persecuted and chased and treated and mauled by animals and different forms of other things, by other Americans. I don't really want to focus on the civil rights era as far as King and Martin of them are actually concerned because we know what they did. I give them credit for what they did, man. Any people who stand up and go against a structure like America, Rome, Greece, anything like that, they deserve credit for that because a part of them knows that their lives are in daily danger. I really want to focus more on the legislation. The Civil Rights Bill of 64 and Voting Rights Act of 65, I believe, or they probably be backwards, but the bills of 64 and 65. This was the same, it was similar to the Civil Rights Bill of 1875. So now, 90 years later, 80 years later, how can you actually pass this legislation now and you couldn't pass it in 1875? I'll tell you how. They didn't use the 14th Amendment. They didn't use it before, they didn't use it now. They use something called interstate commerce. Anytime you pass a law or a bill into law, you need an affirmative action. That means under what rights do you have to pass that actual bill? They use interstate commerce, interstate commerce. They are protecting you as a commodity and a product. The fact that you go to different hotels, the fact that you sleep in different places, the fact that you buy multiple services from different things, they're protecting your existence, Blacks are said to make $1.1 trillion in 2012, bring it to the household. But we don't own our own resources, so it goes straight out. They're protecting you as a commodity. Remember when I talked about the Constitution and how they first recognized you, as a sustainment to economic, as a commodity. And then the Willingness Letter, he wanted to sustain a commodity and a product and the economic. And then you look at the Civil Rights era, and they wanted to sustain a commodity and a product, And then in turn, what it also did, by them being able to touch everything with interstate commerce, it turned America into a police state. It made the national government more dominant than it ever been. They use your fight for freedom in the streets to actually police their own governments. If you want to actually wonder if that has any truth to it, look at 1974. Since 1974, America has jailed more people on the face of this earth than any other nation, So the freest country in the world is jailing more people than anybody. And they normally say that the criminal justice is a pendulum. You give people long sentences and it swings back. It's never swung back. It's never swung back. They've more and more long sentences, they call them the baseball sentences, or the basketball sentences, but it never swung back. So they said we'll free them and integrate them, but we'll police them at will. We'll jail them at will. That's where you get the COINTELPRO with Hoover, eliminate the black messiah who will electrify the masses. So they didn't know who the black messiah could have been. It could have been Malcolm. He was dead already, so he could have been a martyr. It could have been King, but he respected white doctrine, so they left him alone for the time being, until he began to talk about economics. King wasn't assassinated when he was talking about sitting at the lunch counter and being equal. He was assassinated when he started talking about economics and the difference in economics in America between, thus said, black and whites. It could have been Elijah Muhammad, but he was already old. It could be Stokely Carmichael because he had the charisma too. And it could have been any person running around in the street from Black Panther, any black national group going on. So they feared it. So they jailed you or either shot you. That's how they combated their problems, They said, okay, we'll free them and we'll integrate them, but, we'll police them at will, So when you look at the criminal justice system, now it's more blacks incarcerated than any other percentage in America. And we one of the smallest populations in America. So they turned America into a police state, man. That's what they did with those actual documents from civil rights legislation. So you thought you was getting your voting rights on, and you thought you was getting your civil rights on. And a lot of people be like, what happened to blacks after civil rights? What you mean? Y'all went out there for the right to vote. You got the right to vote and people went home. Civil rights to me was never to reform mankind. It was never to reform the human heart. It was never to reform the relationships with people. It was to legislate these things. If you legislate them, that don't mean people are bound to them, if you get what I'm saying. It's just suggested that this is the way that you should act. That don't mean that they have to act that way. So that's what happened.